I do so by referring to respectively ALTI and OSTI. Although I retired at the end of last year, both officers considered it appropriate that I should attend this meeting rather than have the presentation done by Judge Margie Victor, who is my successor with effect from the 1st of January this year. I see Judge Margie is present in the audience, and to her in particular, I extend a warm word of welcome. This is the third joint annual report of ALTI and OSTI. I will briefly explain the format of the further proceedings today. I will do the introduction, and thereafter Denise and Edith will do presentations on behalf of ALTI and OSTI respectively. After Edith has done her presentation, there will be a question and answer session, following which I close the meeting. The theme for the 2022 annual report is shaping our tomorrow. And just so that you can have a look at it and see, that is what the report looks like, and shaping our tomorrow appears on the front cover. In the report, there are a number of appropriate quotations and images. The one quotation which I particularly like is the one attributed to Abraham Lincoln, who said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." Over the last 3 years, ALTI and OSTI were engaged in creating their joint future. This was done by their participation in the amalgamation process, in which the two offices and the Ombudsman for Banking Services and the Credit Ombud will form a single financial services ombudsman scheme. In light of the theme, Shaping Our Tomorrow, it was considered appropriate for me to give a brief overview of the amalgamation process. By way of further background, I point out that I have already reported on that very process on 3 earlier occasions. I did so firstly on pages 8 and 9 of our joint 2020 annual report. The next year on exactly the same pages in the 2021 annual report, and this year on pages 8 to 210 of the current report. I do not consider it necessary to deal with all the developments, but I would rather highlight certain important developments to which I refer in the latest annual report. Firstly, during 2022, ALTI and OSTI were both recognized as industry ombudsman schemes in terms of Section 194 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act. Secondly, the recent important developments are set out as follows in a joint amalgamation progress report, which the 4 participating officers submitted at a meeting with the Ombud Council and the National Treasury on 13 December 2022. I quote as follows from that report. The 4 voluntary schemes, namely Long-Term Insurance Ombudsman, Credit Ombudsman for Banking Services, and the Short-Term Insurance Ombudsman, started meeting to discuss the often mentioned amalgamation of their schemes even before the work of the World Bank diagnostic team started in 2020. For a period, the 4 schemes pended their discussions as we awaited the recommendations of the experts from the World Bank team. The World Bank report was received in June 2021, and the schemes and our respective boards and councils were in agreement with most of the recommendations. Although we have not received National Treasury's feedback, we have been continuously encouraged by the Ombud Council and representatives of National Treasury to continue with our project to establish an amalgamated scheme. We obtained mandates from our respective boards and councils to proceed with the amalgamation project, and earlier this year we started the planning of the practical and physical amalgamation of the 4 schemes into one single new scheme, which for the time being we refer to as the National Financial Ombudsman, in line with the World Bank recommendations. We were advised that we may have to change the name depending on National Treasury's decisions. We followed the recommendations of the World Bank as closely as possible, but in some respects, especially the practical day-to-day running of an office, the World Bank team did not propose any specific recommendations on how to implement the amalgamation of the offices. Working through a number of subcommittees, the 4 schemes met regularly for a few months. The end result was that all the areas highlighted by the World Bank and additional practical day-to-day operational matters were dissected and agreements reached within the committees and documented. The proposed start date that we are working towards for the National Financial Ombudsman to go live is 1 January 2024. We have all presented our plans to our respective boards and councils and received the go-ahead. Unless there are any unforeseen stumbling blocks or instructions to the contrary from the Ombud Council, we will continue with the process to appoint and also to start the process of consulting with all the stakeholders. That is the end of the quotation from the report. A further significant practical milestone was reached in the amalgamation process when OSTI, the Ombudsman for Banking Services, and the Credit Ombud moved into their new offices on 1 April 2023. As I indicated, Denise and Edith will do presentations on behalf of the officers, and I do not want to encroach on their fields. But I would like to indicate to the media representatives the important role which the officers play in our society. To do this, I refer to only 2 statistics of the officers for the last 3 years. Since 2020, when their so-called soft amalgamation commenced, to the end of 2022, the officers received more than 90,000 complaints and written requests for assistance. This is an annual average of more than 30,000. During that 3-year period, the aggregate of the amounts recovered in lump sums for ALTI complainants and the rand value of benefits for ASTI consumers exceeded 1 billion rand. That is a telling amount of money. Before I hand over to Denise, I again point out that after Edith has done her presentation, there will be a question and answer session. Please follow the protocol which is set out on a slide which will then be shown. If you wish to put a question to either Denise or Edith after the meeting, you are more than welcome to do so. And I can already indicate that it may be more appropriate for Denise and Edith to respond to a question after the meeting. I will leave that to them. Without any further ado then, I will hand over to Denise. Denise, please to kindly do your presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and thank you for taking an interest in our report, the third joint annual report with ASTI following our soft amalgamation in 2020. In this annual report, the chairperson of the council, of the ALTI Council, Judge Leona Theron, paid tribute to the late Desmond Smith, who sadly passed away at the beginning of this year. Desmond was a doyen of the insurance industry and a dedicated member of our council for more than 20 years. Judge Theron also pays tribute to Judge McLaren, who retired at the end of last year, and also in the report there are many messages of gratitude for the immense role Judge McLaren played, not only in our office, but in the insurance industry. I wish to express my gratitude for Judge McLaren's input and meticulous oversight of the production of this, his final annual report. The theme of the joint 2022 report, as Judge McLaren pointed out, Shaping Our Tomorrow, encapsulates our preparation for and influencing of the changing ombud landscape. To wit, in 2022, Judge McLaren has already mentioned the amalgamation process. We also applied for and received recognition as an industry ombud scheme in terms of Section 194 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act of 2017. The ALTI Council, together with the ASTI Board, embarked on a recruitment drive during 2022 for a new ombudsman and appointed Judge Margie Victor, who is the first female ombudsman for our office. Turning to our stats, I would just like to highlight a few key figures for the year 2022. 220,836,922 rand was recovered in lump sums for complainants. So 220.8 million, basically. An additional 857,544 rand was granted in compensation for material inconvenience, stress, and loss as a result of insurers' errors, maladministration, or poor service. These are not the only benefits for complainants, as it does not include the non-lump sum awards, such as future income payments, nor the non-monetary awards, such as the reinstatement of a lapsed policy. Not surprisingly, the number of cases were down last year compared to the previous year, as insurers reported fewer COVID-related claims. 16,476 requests for assistance were received in 2022, 5.2% fewer than 17,379 requests received in 2021. 7,126 of the requests for assistance translated into viable complaints or chargeable complaints, as we call them, a 12% decrease from the 8,163 in 2021. 29% of cases were resolved in favor of complainants, a decrease from the 34% of 2021. If we add the 1,666 premature complaints settled in favor of complainants, then the percentage resolved wholly and partially in favor of complainants increases to 38%. 3,510 cases were finalized, and those are the full cases that our office investigated and finalized, as compared to the 3,899 finalized in 2021. Those do not include the number of premature complaints that were transferred to insurance. 89.15% of cases were finalized within 6 months. I now move to the nature of the complaints received. The claims decline category, and those declined because policy terms and conditions were not accounted for, amounted to 44.99% of complaints, and those due to non-disclosure claims declined because of non-disclosure, 5.1%, up from 3.1% from previous year. You'll note that the non-disclosure is not that large percentage of the category of complaints we receive. They do, however, evoke lots of media attention usually. Encouragingly, there was a slight improvement in the percentage of complaints relating to service and poor communication, and a considerable improvement in the percentage of those resolved in that category in favor of complainants. In other words, a decline in the percentage resolved in favor of complainants. This speaks to the return towards normality post-COVID, with fewer claims and return to work by staff. The percentage of complaints about lapsing continues to increase, with it being the category of complaints with the category of complaints being the highest percentage resolved in favor of complainants. 38% of this category is resolved in favor or was resolved in favor of complainants. Complaints related to funeral benefits as a percentage of total complaints increased, as is reflected in the annual report, making up 48% of complaints. This has been a marked trend over the past 2 years, from 39% in 2020. Unsurprisingly, the percentage of credit life complaints returned to pre-COVID levels at 8% of complaints. And then finally, I just wish to mention that our office made 5 final determinations against insurers. The details of these determinations can be found in the annual report and on our website under publications. On that note, if any of you are going to be rushing to our website right now, let me just tell you that we've just received notification that there was a bit of a problem on our service provider side, and the website was down. We're hoping that it will be up soon while they upload the report. Thank you very much. I hand over to Edith.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Judge. And once again, welcome everybody. 2022 began for OSTI with us having to apply to the Ombud Council for recognition as an industry ombud scheme in terms of Section 194 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act. OSTI's recognition was granted on the 29th of April, subject to us making certain changes to our terms of reference by the 30th of September. These changes were made, and at the same time, we took the opportunity to also make 2 changes to our memorandum of incorporation. Both sets of changes were approved by our board of directors on the 29th of June and by our members on the 25th of August. The amended terms of reference and MOI were formally approved on the 9th of December by the Ombud Council, who also confirmed that we had met our conditions for recognition, and this was after both of those documents were published for public comment. A key focus of OSTI's board as well as management continued to be the health and well-being of its staff. Many of the initiatives implemented during 2020 continued last year as well. The office officially reopened on the 21st of February with staff working in the office 1 day a week on a rotational basis, and this increased to 2 days on the 1st of September. OSTI's cloud-based ICT systems continue to support a paperless and hybrid working environment. OSTI had a very busy year last year, not only from the perspective of the recognition process and the amalgamation project that Judge McLaren has canvassed, but also in terms of complaint volumes. As at June last year, the new registered complaints had increased by 11% compared to the previous year. This increase then jumped to 21% in September, and we ended the year with an overall increase of 17.8%. At the end of the year, 11,542 new formal complaints were registered compared to 9,797 in 21. The just over 11,000 complaints were registered from 15,000 inquiries that the office received. We also received over 64,000 calls compared to 60,000 calls in 2021. 10,411 complaints were closed, 4.3% fewer than in 2021. Complaints took an average turnaround time of 122 days to be finalized. Our target is to have a maximum turnaround time of 120 days. In 2021, our turnaround time was 138 days. We managed to reduce the turnaround time last year by 16 days, despite the almost 18% increase in complaints and with the same staff complement. With our public holidays and weekends, this equates to a turnaround time of around 85 days. 50% of complaints were finalized within 4 months. 28% took between 4 and 6 months to be resolved, and the balance of 22% took over 6 months to finalize. Our target as regards the 6-month list, this is the list of complaints that have been outstanding for 6 months and longer, and that we have to report to our board on, is to not have more than 10% of the open cases on the 6-month list. We ended the year with 441 complaints on the list, which represents 10.7% of the open complaints at the time. We ended the year with 4,131 open complaints compared to just over 3,000 open complaints in December 21. Of all the complaints registered, 43% related to motor vehicle insurance, which is still lower than pre-COVID times, but the same as last year or the previous year. 24.6% related to homeowners or buildings insurance, which is around a 3% increase compared to 2021, and as a direct result of the KwaZulu-Natal complaints received. 12.7% related to commercial insurance, which is a decrease of about 1% compared to 2021. 5.9% related to a household contents insurance, the same as in 21. And the balance of 13.8% related to other types of insurance and non-claim related complaints, around a 1% decline. So other types of insurance includes all risks, mobile device, pet, travel, legal expenses, hospital and medical gap cover. Non-claim related complaints include policy queries related to cancellations, lapses, endorsements and premiums. 4% of all the complaints were resolved in the on-transfer process, and this is the process for premature complaints. A premature complaint is a complaint that has been referred to us by an insured before the insured has approached his or her insurer to resolve the complaint. So the insurer is not aware that there is a complaint. In this process, we send the complaint to the insurer and we give the insurer an opportunity to resolve the complaint directly with its insured within a period of 21 days. If the complaint is not resolved within this time frame, then the complaint will follow the normal complaints handling process in the office. 34% of our complaints were resolved in the fast track process, and this is a process for more easily resolvable complaints. And 62% of all the complaints resolved last year were resolved in the standard complaints handling process. The complaints that were finalized with some benefit to the insured yielded an overturn or resolved ratio of 18%, the same as in the 2 previous years. This is an indicator of those complaints where the insurer's stance or its decision was changed by the office with some additional benefit to the insured. The recorded monetary benefit or value for insureds who approached our office for assistance amounted to 109 million rand, 440,000. The majority of complaints were resolved through conciliation without the office having to issue a formal recommendation. And this is testament to the high level of cooperation received by the office from its members. One formal ruling was issued during the year against a member, the details of which are also in our annual report. OSTI achieved an overall average customer experience rating of 78 out of a target of 80, which equates to 97.5%. Customer experience surveys are sent to both insureds and insurers for them to complete on the finalization of a complaint. In line with international best practices for financial ombud schemes, and as part of our social and ethics responsibilities, OSTI published last year a vulnerable consumers policy and a service charter. Certain changes were also made to our ICT systems to better identify and manage vulnerable consumer complaints, and staff training was undertaken and continues. Some socioeconomic data of complainants that I'd like to share with you are 17% of complainants learnt about the office from the internet, 12% by word of mouth, and 11% from insurers. The majority of complainants came to OSTI via email at 53%, followed by OSTI's website at 39%, and 7.5% were referred to OSTI by other ombud schemes and other entities. 40% of complaints were generated from Gauteng, 21% from KwaZulu-Natal, and 12% from the Western Cape. 64% of complainants were male. 59% of complainants were between the ages of 36 and 60, 20% between the ages of 25 and 35, and 18% were 61 years of age and above. Of the vulnerabilities that were disclosed, English literacy was the highest category at 84.5%, followed by a disability, then a communication restriction, and lastly, an adverse life event. I now want to touch on some of the complaint trends that emerged from the complaints that were finalized last year. The full report is available in our annual report. As regards motor vehicle insurance, 65% of these complaints related to accidents, 14% to warranty and mechanical breakdowns, and 7% to thefts and hijacks, much the same as in 2021. The primary reason for complaints under this category of insurance was claims rejected on the basis of an exclusion in the policy, and in particular, the prevention of loss or lack of due care exclusion, which we refer to in the office as the reasonable precautions exclusion. This has been consistent since 2019. Many of these claims are rejected on the allegation that the driver was speeding. In such a case, the insurer must show that the driver was reckless in the legal sense and not merely negligent before succeeding with its rejection. Briefly, what the insurer needs to demonstrate is that the driver foresaw the possibility of the loss or damage eventuating, but nevertheless courted the danger and failed to take reasonable steps to prevent it. Foreseeability is determined by inferential reasoning based on the facts of a case. Other reasons for motor vehicle insurance complaints coming to our office are that the quantum of the claim was in dispute after the insurer had accepted liability, and non-disclosure or misrepresentation at the inception or sales point of the policy. Driving under the influence has dropped from the 4th highest reason for complaints in 2021 to the 6th highest reason in 2022. More complaints were received last year than in 2021, where the reason for the complaint was the non-payment of premiums and a lack of maintenance. This is a reflection of the difficult economic times that we live in, leading to policyholders not paying their premiums monthly or timelessly and not maintaining their vehicles. This is a theme that comes through to some degree in the other categories of insurance as well. As regards homeowners or buildings insurance complaints, 45% related to claims for damage caused by acts of nature, such as storms or floods. 16% related to the bursting of water apparatuses, mainly geysers, and 11% to the KwaZulu-Natal floods of April and May last year. The primary reason for the complaints under this category of insurance are again claims rejected on the basis of a policy exclusion, gradual deterioration, a lack of maintenance, or wear and tear. This trend is consistent with the previous year's trends. Although an insured peril or event may have occurred, such as a storm, often the proximate cause of the damage is a structural defect or a lack of maintenance or a gradually operating cause, such as wear and tear. The test used is the but-for test. For example, an insurer will argue that, but for the structural defect or the wear and tear, the home would have been able to withstand the storm. The insurer bears the onus of proof and must prove its rejection and all rejections on a balance of probabilities. Through our various consumer awareness initiatives, we have continued to highlight the responsibility of homeowners to maintain their properties, to ensure that their buildings are structurally sound. Insurance covers damage that is caused by unforeseen, single, and sudden events as listed in the policies, and not damage that has occurred gradually over time. The second highest reason for complaints in the homeowners insurance category are rejections on the basis that the damage was not caused by an insured peril, followed by rejections on defective design. As regards household contents complaints, 40% of these related to thefts and burglaries, followed by power surge as a result of load shedding at 20%, and accidental damage at 17%. Theft and burglary related complaints has decreased from 44% in 2021 to 40% last year. Power surge related complaints have steadily increased since 2018. Again, last year, power surge complaints increased from 16% in 2021 to 20% in 2022. Many insurers have changed the cover in relation to power surges, and in the way in which they view this risk. As load shedding is scheduled, it may no longer be seen as an unexpected and unforeseen event. Policyholders are again encouraged to check their policies and engage with their insurers and brokers on this cover. As regards commercial insurance complaints, the highest number of complaints related to heavy commercial vehicles at 27%, which is an increase from 19% in 2022, followed by buildings claims at 20%. The main reason for complaints in this category of insurance are rejection of claims on the exclusion of gradual deterioration, a lack of maintenance, and wear and tear, followed by the quantum of the claim being in dispute and the criteria for the insured event not being met. As regards the other category of insurance cover, as well as non-claim related complaints, the highest number of complaints are related to claims for the theft or robbery of mobile devices at 28%, followed by the accidental damage of mobile devices at 12%, and then gap medical insurance. The main reason for complaints in this category is the rejection of claims on the basis of policy exclusions, especially the exclusion pertaining to the failure to prevent the loss or the lack of due care. This is followed by the criteria for the insured event not being met, and also disputes around the quantum of claims. Most of the South African Special Risks Insurance Association, or SASRIA, related complaints following the riots and looting and civil unrest in KwaZulu-Natal in July last year related to 21 related to commercial insurance claims, followed by household contents related claims. The majority of the complaints that we have received related to the KZN floods related to homeowners insurance, followed by commercial, motor vehicle, and contents insurance. Thank you. This brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Edith. Thanks a lot. And there, as I indicated, thank you, Marlies. Marlies has put up the question and answer protocol slide. And this is the opportunity for anybody who has a question to either Denise
Sorry, is it just on my side or is the judge frozen?
It's on my side as well. I think there is a connectivity issue.
Okay. We can continue though with any questions. I think Denise is still, maybe she's also frozen because they're sharing the same laptop. I'm happy to take any questions on the short-term non-life side. There's Judge again. Hi, Judge.
Please accept my apologies. We had a technical problem here. Fortunately, we were able to rejoin the meeting. Edith, so we are into the question and answer session. Should we just deal with the questions as they crop up and see what happens?
Yes, Judge. Thank you.
Thanks, Edith.
Judge, I see Wendy's got her hand up. Wendy, you may proceed.
Sorry, just had to unmute. Hello, Edith. Thank you for the report. Just a question around the issue of storm-related, for example, claims being rejected on the grounds of structural wear and tear, or I mean, wear and tear or structural defects, but for which the dwelling is deemed by the insurer to have been able to withstand that sudden event. You said that the insurer must prove this on a balance of probabilities. Could you give us some more detail around what form that proof would have to take to satisfy your office that that's a valid reason for rejection?
Thanks, Wendy. So that usually involves the insurer having sent out a loss adjuster, or initially a service provider. And if there is any doubt about what was the cause of the damage, so what we find in a lot of these complaints that come to our office is that there are concurrent causes. So part of the damage was caused by the storm or the flood, part of it was caused by structural defect. And so what insurers have been doing is sending out, if they do send out a service provider, they'll follow that up with a loss adjuster, and we get a report. And then in some cases, and in many of the cases that have come to office, structural engineer reports as well. So it is quite, an onerous burden. They have to satisfy our office that indeed some of the damage does not fall within the cover. Especially given the fact that the KZN floods were declared a national disaster.
Okay, thanks. So are you able, just off your top of your head, it's a difficult question, I know, just to say, roughly speaking, what percentage of those particular cases relating to the KZN floods and structural damage would have gone in the complainant's favour, the office having deemed the loss adjusters' reports, structural engineers' reports, etc., not to have supported their argument that the house would have withstood the storm if not for some kind of inherent defects. In other words, that the storm wasn't the proximate cause, that outrageously massive storm. The storm wasn't the cause. It was in fact some wear and tear issues, lack of maintenance. How many, long-winded question, but in what percentage of those cases did your adjudicators find in favour of the complainant?
No, I don't have that specific percentage, but I can tell you that in what we call the escalation process, where either party is entitled to escalate a complaint for reconsideration, after a recommendation is issued by our office. Based on what we've seen in that committee, quite a few of those have been overturned, and where we have found that the insurer has not satisfied or has not provided sufficient evidence to throw out the entire claim. So in a lot of those cases, we are arguing that concurrent causes operated and the insurer is in for at least a portion of that damage, if not all the damage. So we've seen quite a few of those in that escalation committee that we have overturned.
Excellent. Thank you, Edith.
Thank you. Nisa?
Hi, can everybody hear me? Sorry, I didn't. I thought somebody else was going to unmute me. Edith, I don't know if I heard right. I thought I heard you saying that the turnaround time on resolution of complaints was reduced by 16 days. And for those of us who've been reporting on these reports for many years, that's quite a significant difference. How did your office do that? Was there something else at play?
No, I think we put in quite a few initiatives in order to address our turnaround time that had gone up quite significantly in 2021, and we weren't happy with that, and we really just put in quite a number of internal initiatives without having to increase our staff complement, and we were able to reduce the turnaround time significantly, and almost reaching the target that we set for ourselves. I must just say that these are internal targets. They haven't been set by, a regulator, and they're based also on, research of other ombud schemes and what their turnaround times are. Of course, different complaints, not all the schemes deal with the same type of complaint. So one also has to keep that in mind. We do deal with quite a lot of complex complaints, but at the same time, we've recognized that there are more easily resolvable ones, and that's why we have the fast track process in place as well to deal with those more quickly. It's not that we don't give them the attention they deserve. They just are on the papers quite easy to resolve compared to others that require a lot more information and a lot more interrogation. So really just a lot of initiatives that we implemented internally to bring down our turnaround time. Thank you.
And then when you talk about those internal initiatives, does one of those include more digitization of your processes to make things flow smoothly? Because otherwise I'm kind of getting an image of you cracking the whip.
Those enhancements were actually made just before COVID came into play. So that's why we've been able to work remotely since COVID, because just before that we'd implemented a paperless system and cloud-based system. So there's full visibility of all the complaints and where they are in the process, and that has been there for a while. So I can't attribute it to that, no, Nisa. Maybe it is just cracking the whip a little bit harder.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy, is that an old hand or a new one?
It's old. Sorry, we should know these things by now. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Gareth, please go ahead.
Hi, Edith. This is another question for you. I'm afraid it looks like the person who goes second gets grilled the most. I've noticed a lot of small changes coming through in my annual schedule from the insurer/broker. And I was wondering how often you get a complaint where the insured is actually not aware of a condition on their policy. And the reason I say that is because many of these tweaks are very small, but have significant impact on the level of cover and what the insurer will or will not consider when paying. So that's one question. And then I have a second one, which we can do after you answer this one, or I can give them both.
I'd prefer to answer this one first, Gareth, if you don't mind. So yes, there are many complaints where insureds come to us and say that they were not aware that there had been policy changes. The first thing we look at is what did the insurer do in order to bring to the policyholder's attention the change. And it is quite specific. It cannot just be a general, here is your schedule, we made some changes and that's it. They have to refer to the specific changes in terms of the policyholder protection rules. So we start there. It's not even based on equity. It's based on what their obligations are in terms of the law. If they can satisfy us that they did give proper notice as required, then there's very little that we can do to change the insurer's stance. And just because someone has a broker doesn't in any way watered down the insurer's obligation in that regard. And we do see a lot of that, especially around the power surge complaints where that cover has been, if it was there, taken away, and things have not been explained properly, that, you know, policyholders can request the cover, but they'll now have to pay an additional premium. It's not part of the traditional package, so to speak.
The second part of the second question is, in the event of an insurer repudiating based on a structural issue, what obligation is there on the insurer to make sure that when they onboard the risk, the structure is adequate? Because what I find is many people are paying a policy, and let's say, for example, a storm blows your ceiling boards in. The assessor rocks up and says, well, those ceiling boards weren't installed properly, we're not going to pay the claim. Yet the insurer took the risk on the basis that they were happy with accepting the risk. Any comment on that?
So there is no obligation on an insurer. Insurers usually only do that type of assessment with commercial properties, and then not even all commercial properties. They simply don't have the resources or the funding to do that. And they've never done it, and it is not an obligation in terms of the law for them to carry out such an assessment. It really does become the homeowner's responsibility, especially when buying a new home, to bring in perhaps a structural engineer to have a look at these, you know, to have a look at the property and make sure that there is nothing untoward the structure, or, you know, perhaps highlight what can be done in order to prevent a rejection going forward. But there is simply no obligation on the insurer to carry out such an assessment at the inception of a policy.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Indeed, I see that we've nearly come to 12 noon. I don't see any further hands up. I have indicated that people are free to put questions to you after the meeting, but it seems to me that we've come to the end of this meeting, and Denise agrees with it. Is it in order if I bring it to a close? I think so.
Thank you, Judge. Yes.
There we are. Yes. Thanks everybody for attending and for participating in this meeting. I wish you keep well, stay safe, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Goodbye.